Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Suzanne Harris.
Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Sloan Fremont, filling in for Suzanne Harris. This is a podcast where listeners get the secret story behind every book. Joining me today is Dr. Hilmar Lorenz, author of the book, Facing the Environmental Crisis, Consequences for Scientific and Religious Communities. Dr. Lorenz, welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you.
So let's start out by telling the audience a little bit about yourself and what led you to write your book, Facing the Environmental Crisis.
There are two things to say about me. I am a retired Lutheran pastor. That's the one thing. Beside this, I have made my doctorate in philosophy with a German philosophy professor, Karl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, who originally was an atomic physicist and very close pupil of Werner Heisenberg, who has created quantum theory.
Oh, wow.
From there, I have a long story in dealing with the subject of the environment. Mm-hmm. So to put it, my personal result into one formula, science is theory. Theory which has been technologically very successful. This is shown by 300 years of waves of industrialization in the Western world. Mm-hmm. But besides this success, it has side effects, side effects which we summarize now under the concept of environmental crisis. Mm-hmm. These are effects, we know this term from medicine. These are side effects which are not in the focus as long as you make the successful theories. Mm-hmm. So you can have technologically the greatest successes you want to have. It doesn't help us so much if these successes put at stake human civilization. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem we have to face. So every public and political actions have to face this, because if we ignore it, it might be the doom of human civilization, no longer in my generation, but you in your generation will get more of it. And there are other generations for whom life may become very miserable if they are still able to live in the world which is left to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a big topic.
Yes, indeed.
So, how were you able to research and distill the topic down to fit it in a book that was, for people to read?
Yes, it's a long process of inner learning. Mm-hmm. Of course, a lifelong. I'm now 82 years. When I published it, I was 77 years. So this is, in fact, the result of thinking about the topic for a whole life. So I have read many books about it, and I have very little referred to other books. I'm just, in the books, I come out with my arguments. Otherwise, the book might have become 10 times as thick.
Right. So what are some of the changes or themes you've seen over the past few years as it relates to the environmental crisis?
I don't see any change as far as the subject is concerned, but I see a certain change in politics.
Okay.
So as the new government in Germany, in which now the Green Party is represented, they say they want to focus on stopping global warming as far as the CO2 output of Germany is concerned. So, and a little similar sounds what we have heard by the Biden administration in the United States. So, but these are still words. So, and that's what the subject of my book is about, that we should not expect everything from politics in this regard. We should focus on those communities in our societies that are closest to the subject. This is in one way the scientific community, because the technological success has developed from modern physics. I could call names Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton. These theories focus on a certain aspect of human experience. So to say it, I have to simplify. It's the aspect of experience which comes to our consciousness if we look at the world like a machine. So that's why these theories are called theory of mechanics. And if you do this, you have incredible technological successes, but you have the environmental crisis, which is life-threatening for all life on Earth and also for human lives. That's the difficult situation we are in. So the question is, what do we do with this? So the scientific communities are those that have got diplomas in theorizing in this field.
Right.
They have not got a diploma because it's not part of science in how to deal with this theorizing in the context of experience and human life in general. This is missing.
Okay.
And that's exactly, I think, our problem. And I would like to, if it's okay, to draw one consequences. It's not only physics that treats nature like a machine, but there is also economists deal with the market as if it was a machine. So by this aspect, they just ignore the other side, that trade has to do with human action and communication, and insofar with the whole aspect of ethics too, of morality in it. So, but economists are not educated to focus on this. They are educated to make this scientific game with markets as if it was a mechanism. So, and it's very interesting that this economy, very few of the economists have predicted the economic crisis of 2008. And I think it's exactly because this dimension was missing, because markets collapse as soon as the traders lose their trust in each other.
Right.
I talk about this ordinary word of trust, but it's basic. Without trust, the world market is stuck, and we would starve within 4 weeks and would be dead because nothing works anymore.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and that's the big problem. That's why I say scientific communities have to face their own involvement in this problem, because as long as they theorize, they suggest that they only talk about what exists even without them. But that's not true, because of the aspect on which they focus, thereby they do something with nature which doesn't appear in the theories, but we feel the side effects from the fact that it doesn't disappear in the theories, and that makes it so difficult for us to handle the problem.
Ah, yes, that makes sense. I see that angle. I hadn't really considered that before, but I can see that. And I thought it was very interesting that you also included religious communities in the title.
Yeah, that's the other subject. Can you talk a little bit
about that? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. For decades, all major churches make declaration that humans should preserve God's creation from human destruction. But somehow it doesn't reach society to the degree that society would follow this proposal.
Right.
It doesn't happen, and I would say, why doesn't it happen? Because it is done by the higher levels. Religious communities know hierarchies, and these higher levels, obviously, as far as these hierarchies function since antiquity, in fact, these higher levels are unable to make their ordinary members act accordingly. Yeah. So if this declaration would add so and so many congregations in our religious community will act accordingly. For example, to minimize their use of energies, to minimize their consummation in general. It would have enormous effects on economy, it would not be forbidden in our democracy, because that's the meaning of democracy, that people are allowed to do these things.
Right.
But it doesn't happen. And I think just besides, that's one of the reasons why the major churches are declining so much in the Western world. I have here in Germany numbers that in 40 years, the numbers of members have shrunk to half of what they were before.
Right.
So this belongs together because apparently this way of talking at higher levels in the hierarchy has no longer effects on the people. So democracy has developed away from these hierarchic structures in which, for example, European societies have been organized for centuries, and where church has not questioned the hierarchy, but could bring something like a moral correction to the mundane secular hierarchies, from the emperor on top down to the beggar underneath. Yeah, but since this world of hierarchies is gone, I say thanks God, because it totally, in fact, totally disturbs the picture of what religion is about. But this has not happened. So for churches, it will be, and don't think that, for example, smaller churches in the US, because they have been founded in the US, would be better off.
Mm-hmm.
My experience with these people is that they live also in these hierarchies in which always the elder one or somebody on top of them told them what to do. They don't act from themselves. So what we need is a sort of democratization also in our religions,
mm-hmm.
which has not happened in history. In America, as little as in Europe.
Right, right. Yeah.
Is it clear what I said? Can you understand me?
I can. I'm thinking about it, because this is, you've presented this in such an interesting way, and not one that I've ever considered before. So
yeah.
And it's such a big topic, and unfortunately, I mean, I think we could talk for hours about this, but
yes,
we don't have that long. But
no,
since this is such a big topic, is there maybe a couple of words or themes you could use to describe your book, or maybe summarize what you've written, maybe just the condensed version, so the listeners can have an understanding to take with them when they pick up your book?
Yeah, of course. I focus in the book, basically what we are talking of is our responsibility as human beings, and we ought to be conscious of this as far as we live in democracies. We see right now in the Ukraine the crash between this democratic thought we are now reflecting and an authoritarian dictatorial order of things. So this shows from another side that we cannot let things go. Mm-hmm. We have to fight for that that it stays the way we are used to it in the United States, as we are used to it in Germany now, mm-hmm. that we have the chance to act without being prevented by a dictator on top of our state who puts us in prison, as Putin puts now those Russians into prison who protest against the war. So that's we cannot believe, and I think it has happened too much, that we thought now every reasonable person thinks like a Democrat, and insofar these things are safe, we can rely on it. No, we have to fight for it day by day, always anew, and a very specific area of fighting for it is to fight against those interests, economic interests, which in fact put in danger the environment and thereby the future of life on this earth and of human beings as well.
Right. And so it sounds like, your book is encouraging action because this is such a big topic that sometimes it can feel like, what can I do about it? I'm just one person, right? It feels very it doesn't, my actions don't matter, but it sounds like what you're saying is every person's actions matter. And when we all come together, that, the more people that come together, there's more action and then there's bigger impact.
Exactly. But I would say, and that's the focus of the book, that because of history, scientific communities and religious communities have a particular responsibility for our societies in their totality. Mm-hmm. Neither the scientists can say, we are here a little club who just has, which just has fun, as you can hear it from many ingenious scientists that they talk this way. It brings fun to me. Nor can religions say, yes, we are only responsible for our members, and we don't care about the rest of society. This is a total misunderstanding of what religion is about. Religion is about something which brings a better world for all human beings.
Yes. These are such good points that you're bringing up, and again, I like the way you've tied the two together, and also that reminder for everybody, myself included, and in the listeners, that we all have a part to play, and it's easy to feel like like it doesn't matter. But I'm glad you're reminding everybody that it does matter.
But nearly everybody of us has got an education which has more or less influenced by science. That's the way I understand the public educational systems in the Western world. Mm-hmm. And the other point, everybody, all of us have been at one or the other point of our lives in touch with religious communities.
Right.
So insofar, the meaning is not that's only their business and not our business, of course. Facing the environmental crisis, my title, is the business of all of us.
Yeah. That's such a great reminder. And unfortunately, we're coming up on time today. My guest has been Dr. Hilmar Lorenz, author of the book, Facing the Environmental Crisis, Consequences for Scientific and Religious Communities. And Dr. Lorenz, before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to leave for the listeners today as it relates to your book and the topic?
Okay. I can only repeat what I just said. Every listener is somehow in a situation where she is asked to overtake responsibility for the human community. That's the basic meaning of democracy. Yeah. That's for what Thomas Jefferson, the founders of the US democracy, is the oldest one in the Western world, have fought for.
Right.
So, but it's not to say, okay, these are our saints on top.
Right.
No, they certainly were no saints. Yeah.
Right.
Look at Thomas Jefferson and his relationship to slavery. No? Just as an example, that's not the case. But there were human beings as all of us. So they had the courage to overtake responsibility, and in the war they risked their life. But they are human beings like all of us, and all of us are asked to overtake our responsibility in this world now, which is quite different. For example, we would have to talk about economy. I understand Thomas Jefferson's position about markets. In his time, I would have said the same. What he could not know is that economy has become such an enormous political world power in a world market. So I would ask for that people in the United States start to revise this, what Jefferson held for, in the spirit of Jefferson, but adjust it to the modern world. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid that in the US, there are too many people who think everything is clear and are stuck with the 18th century in these questions. 18th century economy was totally different from today, and that's the decisive point. And here all of us are asked to overthink this and to become dignified as heirs of these people.
Right. Yeah. And this has been such a great conversation. We've raised a lot of big questions and a lot of big points. Yeah. And like I said, I think we could talk for hours about that, but
yes, of course,
our time is up. So Dr. Lorenz, thank you for joining us today and being our guest on Books on Air.
Yeah, thank you.
You can find more about the book, Facing the Environmental Crisis, Consequences for Scientific and Religious Communities, on Amazon. And I'll link to the book in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Sloan Fremont, and I hope you'll join us for the next Books on Air podcast. Remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.